Welcome to the District 77 debate hosted by the Evansville Courier and Press. I'm John Gibson of WNIN News, and I'll be your moderator this evening. We're asking the small crowd here to not applaud or cheer during the debate tonight, except for this moment as we introduce the candidates, Democrat Ryan Hatfield and Republican Johnny Kincaid. Welcome, gentlemen. We appreciate you coming to the event this evening. Joining me on the panel here are Courier and Press reporters Shannon Hall, Zach Evans, and Jay Young. Now, the candidates will have up to 1 minute to respond to questions, 30 seconds to rebut the questions. Each candidate will also be allowed to deliver an opening statement, up to 1 minute, as well as a closing statement. Now, Mr. Hatfield won the coin toss just moments ago, so he'll deliver his opening statement first. Mr. Hatfield, you have 60 seconds.
Thank you, and thank you to the Courier and Press and WNIN for hosting us this evening. I'm glad to be here and glad to be running for state representative because I believe there are so many issues facing Indiana families and specifically Evansville families that need to be addressed. And we'll have an opportunity this evening to debate those. I certainly intend to lay out my plans for the future in the General Assembly. But before I go on and in my opening, I'd like to actually thank my opponent. Mr. Kincaid and I sat down in May and declared that we would have a positive and open campaign, and with only 28 days to go, we've been able to accomplish that. Something that you don't see on the national stage today. And so I look forward to a debate that is about the issues and about the families of Evansville rather than politics or negative campaigning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. Mr. Kincaid, you have 60 seconds.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks to the Courier and Press and to WNIN, and thank you to those who are watching the live stream at home. We'll do our best not to put you to sleep during the course of the evening. I think that there are a couple of areas that are really important to consider when we're looking at this race for state representative. One of those is life experience. You know, I came to the Evansville area 30 years ago, and I've dedicated the past 3 decades to serving this community in every capacity that I possibly could. The other thing is relatability and who's going to be the best representative for the people in District 77. It's a district that has one of low income level, some lower socioeconomic groups that we're dealing with, and so the real question is who's going to be able to do the most to represent and help assist people in District 77.
All right, and thank you, Mr. Kincaid. Our first question will go to Mr. Kincaid. The 77th District in the Indiana General Assembly is historically Democratic. Why did you decide to run for office in the face of what some might call insurmountable odds?
Yeah, and I've heard those words, insurmountable odds, a few times during the course of this campaign. Actually, there's never been a Republican win this seat. But I decided that I wanted to run for this seat primarily because I care. I love the community. I fell in love with Evansville shortly after moving here back in 1987, and you know, so this is just, to me, an extension of the service that I've already been doing within the community. I don't think that the odds are insurmountable. I think that it's possible for a Republican candidate to win it, especially a candidate who's coming in as a compassionate candidate, somebody who believes in reaching out to people, to helping people, to giving people a boost up in the community. You know, the folks in District 77, the average median family income is only $33,000 a year. That's $3,000 less than it is for the rest of Vanderburgh County and $10,000 less than it is across the state of Indiana. And I believe that we need to do everything possible to try to bring good, higher paying jobs to the people here in District 77. And I believe that with assistance from other members of the state legislature that we can do exactly that.
All right, and Mr. Hatfield, you have well, no political experience. You're heading into what might be a supermajority if you were to win. Republicans have firm control of the Indiana General Assembly. How would you accomplish your agenda? How would you form alliances and get things done under those circumstances?
Well, I appreciate the question because you're right. There is going to be very likely a supermajority, and if not a supermajority, a heavy majority Republican. And if you believe, one of the primary reasons I'm running is because I believe that the residents of Indiana need a choice and need competing ideas in the legislature. And if you believe that the legislature needs to be a place where ideas are debated and the best ideas rise and the worst ideas fail, then we need multiple parties to represent you in the State House. And that's why I'm running. And it's not just to have multiple ideas, but also to have somebody who's going to listen to you, to have somebody who's going to worry about the effects of the legislation. I got in this race because of legislation that was written poorly. And I'm going to be a legislator that worries about the effects on people back home.
Okay, that is the time. Thank you very much. Our next question will come from Evansville Courier and Press correspondent Shannon Hall.
Hi, guys. This is going to go to Ryan first. Some Indiana police departments are ditching their body cams because of the cost and regulations that were passed recently to store and edit digital video. Do you think body cameras should be required? Or if so, how would you regulate them?
Well, we have seen body cameras kind of come into the mainstream over the last several years. And I don't believe that in Indiana we're at a budget place where we can require local governments to require them on their police departments. The truth is local governments are hurting. And as we'll talk about later, I'm proposing that local governments get more bang for their buck as we send our tax dollars to Indianapolis. Oftentimes here in Evansville, we don't see the return that we deserve. And that's part of the problem with requiring body cameras. But body cameras are a good tool to use for law enforcement officers, both to protect law enforcement officers and those in the community and the public at large. So I think that the state needs to ensure that when we have those body cameras, they're working properly and we're making sure that we're keeping everybody safe.
Okay. And Johnny?
I'm a big fan of the body cameras, actually. I know that there are many times that those cameras have proved their worth out in the field by helping show what really happens with police officers when they're out on a call. I recently had a conversation with Gail Reekin because this is one of her topics that she's been passionate about. And we talked about this issue of how long those files need to be retained. You know, video files are huge, and the cost for local police departments for being able to keep those files over a long period of time can get cost prohibitive. So I believe that we need to make some adjustments in the law where it's at right now to be able to find something that's a common sense answer there. But I'm a very strong believer in working with local law enforcement in getting those body cams on as many officers as possible.
All right, and we should point out at this point that the candidates are working to replace Gail Reekin, who's been the District 77 representative. She's retiring, and the winner of this race will replace her at the State House. Well, let's move down the panel now. The next question will come from Evansville Courier and Press reporter Zach Evans.
Hi. Mental health resources and jail overcrowding are tied together. How would you, as a legislator, use your position to address these issues, Johnny?
Well, first of all, I have been a volunteer in jail and prison ministry for the past several years. And there are some remarkable programs now that are going into the prison system here in Indiana that's helping to affect the recidivism rate within the prison system. I think one of my first observations when I went into Wabash Valley Correctional Facility was seeing the guys there who really shouldn't be in prison, should be in a mental care kind of facility. I was really moved by that because they line up for medications. several times a day. And they're housed in the general population in the facility, and that creates all kinds of problems for the facility, for the inmates, and for everyone involved. So I would like to see some kind of movement made to address that issue.
Same question.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for how you phrased it. Mental illness. The vast majority of crime happens by folks suffering from mental illness, and we've got to do better treating these individuals. The National Alliance for the Mentally Ill recently graded Indiana and gave us a D for how we're taking care of folks who are mentally ill. These are the folks who are oftentimes falling victim to drug addiction. And so we've got to do more for those suffering with mental illness. We have to do more with those suffering from drug addiction. And this is what I do as a prosecutor. This is where I have professionally made my career, because I believe that we can help people, and I've done it through treatment courts, making sure that we're separating the drug dealers from those who are addicted. And then we also, and I see that I'm running on time, so I'm gonna tell you this, the jail overcrowding problem was caused by the state when they required municipalities to take more and more inmates, more and more felons into the jails, and restricted their ability to send them to prison.
Okay, we've got to move on. Thank you very much. Our next question comes from Evansville Courier and Press reporter Jay Young.
First of all, thank you both for coming tonight. This is very important. I want to go back to the body cams for a second. Obviously, one of the things that our local department expresses all the time is the cost involved. Should the state be giving money to the local departments to implement these programs?
And that would be for
Thank you.
starting with yes, Mr. Hatfield.
The state absolutely needs to be funding municipalities in a greater rate. What's happened in state government, and this quite frankly is what happens when you have only one side represented without any debate, they have taken our tax dollars, they've created a surplus, which in a lot of ways is a good thing, but they failed to return it to the municipalities or to the local governments. So what they do, they created a local income option tax because they didn't want to deal with the funding mechanisms that the local municipalities or that our city government is facing. And so they passed the buck to our local governments. So absolutely, state government needs to play its role as a tax collector, and then needs to make sure we get our fair share of the pie, and that means providing money available for local law enforcement and police officers.
And Mr. Kincaid?
All right. Well, unfunded mandates is a big problem. And, states all over the country do this, where the state decides that they're going to require certain things of local government, and then they wind up not providing any kind of funding for that. The body cams is a great example of that, and we really need to do more from the state level to help provide the necessary resources for those body cams. We've talked about jail overcrowding. That's a direct result of an unfunded mandate. The state requiring that we make a shift in how we deal with our prison population, and we force it all back to the local jailers to take care of the state's problem. And now the state is sitting with open beds in some of the facilities, such as Branchville, where they could be housing some of these inmates that are now a burden to the local county jails.
All right, that is time. Thank you very much. All right, I'll take the next question here, and we'll start with Mr. Kincaid. A recent report that ran in USA Today, a couple of other media groups were involved, showed that Southwest Indiana is the most polluted area in terms of air pollution in the country. Johnny, I know over the years you've been a strong advocate for smoking cessation. What should the state do in terms of trying to reduce air pollution, carbon emissions, that kind of thing?
Well, I think that the state needs to take every step that we possibly can to work with local industry. Here's the thing. I believe that the federal government just it went into overreach like crazy when it came to the EPA standards and forcing them to take place as quickly as what they did. And as a state, we need to address that, but we need to give time for industries to adapt and time for our economy to adapt, because as those mandates came down from the federal level, all of a sudden we were looking at loss of jobs and you know, putting a hardship on families here in southern Indiana that we really need to take more time with it so that we don't place that burden and that hardship on those families.
And Ryan, your chance to respond to that. Should the state be doing more to reduce these carbon emissions?
Absolutely we should, but we need to do it in a way that doesn't simply throw out the tens of thousands of families affected by the coal industry here in Indiana. But the truth is, we were making progress, and over the last 4 years, we have gone backwards. Under Governor Daniels' Energizing Indiana plan, we were making progress. We had innovation involved in that plan, where gas from manure allowed farmers to create electricity from that. And we were doing things that were along the right track. What's happened over the last 4 years is Governor Pence has let the Energizing Indiana plan that Governor Daniels put in place lapse. He also has let the measures expire and repealed some of the measures that were for the air quality. So we've got to take an all of the above strategy that includes clean coal, alternative fuels, gas, but we got to make sure that Indiana families aren't losing their livelihoods.
All right, thank you very much. And the next question comes from Shannon Hall.
All right, well, we're going to start with Ryan. Considering issues with Interstate 69 Section 5, do you think funding major road and infrastructure projects through public-private partnerships is a good idea?
You know, I think that any time we can use public-private partnerships, it's a good thing. But we've got to do it in a way that makes sense. And let me give you an example. We recently had a public-private partnership in northern Indiana for toll roads, and they've completely fallen apart. It provided some of the funding for I-69, and that was a positive thing. However, the residents in northern Indiana don't think so. And it was because the plan lacked proper oversight. And so we need public-private partnerships. I think our local government here in Evansville does a great job working with private partners in a whole scheme of things. However, whenever we have public-private partnerships, we need to make sure that we have proper oversight so that 1, the project gets done, 2, the project gets done on time, and 3, the private partners aren't able to run up costs.
Or Johnny, sorry.
That's okay. I'll take being mistaken for the young, handsome one in the group. You know, those private partnerships, public partnerships, really do need the oversight. That is absolutely true. But you know, if it hadn't been for the fact that we were getting innovative with these kinds of partnerships under the Mitch Daniels administration, we'd never have I-69. I-69 had been talked about for a long time, and you know, people from Evansville would make trips up to go sit in the governor's office on many occasions to try to share how much we needed that new highway. And it didn't happen until Mitch Daniels decided to make it a priority and find creative ways to be able to get the funding together to be able to make that happen. Now, we do need the oversight. That's the biggest issue there. But certainly finding creative ways to be able to finance roads that provide jobs here in Indiana is a great thing.
All right, well, let's move on to the next question, and that will come from Courier and Press reporter Zach Evans.
Johnny, what should the state's approach be to addressing the amount of opiate and heroin overdoses that we've seen lately?
This is a huge problem. It's academic. I mean, man. And it's that it affects families so much. I mean, everybody who's connected with the addict is affected by it. I've always been a believer, you know, in comprehensive approaches. When I first came to town, I was involved with the Governor's Commission for Drug-Free Indiana. That commission always preached a comprehensive approach, and I believe is the right approach, which is that you have to combine education along with treatment being available, and law enforcement has to be a part of that equation as well. We have to treat the addiction issue for what it is, which is an illness that affects so many people in our community. And the fact that we're seeing this epidemic of overdoses taking place is just horrible, and it's something that we really need to focus our state on.
Mr. Hatfield?
Well, and I have talked at length about mental illness and the need to treat mental illness and to treat the addiction. But we also need to go after the folks that are dealing these drugs. And I spent my first 2 years in the prosecutor's office going after drug dealers who were dealing methamphetamine and heroin to our children. And this issue is not a single issue. It has many layers. And that means that we need to get the folks who are addicted into treatment courts and into rehab centers to treat their addiction. But we also have to make sure that we're fighting drug dealers who are putting these drugs on the street. And we do that through limiting folks' ability to get pseudoephedrine to make methamphetamine. And we also need to ensure that we are equipping our police officers with drugs that prevent overdoses from heroin.
All right, that is time. The next question will come from the Courier and Press's Jay Young.
Mr. Hatfield, last night the Evansville City Council voted to reduce the homestead tax credit, effectively raising the taxes of most of the people in Vanderburgh County. They did this even though there are literally tens of thousands of dollars in uncollected taxes on the books right now that really can't be collected because the local authorities don't have the same ability and power as, say, the Indiana State Department of Revenue. What can state lawmakers do to make that kind of situation so locals can collect taxes that are owed?
Well, we need to give them the tools to do so. And this is exactly the type of legislator I'll be. When in my opening statement I said I'm going to be a legislator that is here in Evansville talking to folks in Evansville on the ground. That includes our local leaders, talking to Mayor Winnicky and our city council members and making sure that they have the tools needed to address these issues. And so it absolutely is vital that at every stage of state government, we are addressing these issues by talking to the folks that they most closely affect. And that's the type of representative I'll be. I'll be here. I'll be talking to folks on the ground to make sure that we're giving them the tools necessary to succeed. In this case, to collect the tax revenue that they've been unable to collect.
Mr. Kincaid?
I'm a believer that we need to leave as much power as possible in local hands in government. You know, I've spent time forging relationships with members of the city council, with our mayor, with county commissioners, and will continue to nurture those relationships, to listen to their input and their thoughts on things. It's important that we do pay attention to what's going on here at home and take that to the State House. It's also important that we make sure that we're giving the right tools to the people at a local level. And this city council, I think, felt that they had no other options available to them with passing the ordinance last night. I know that it was a very emotional and heated meeting and a tough decision for them to be able to make. And I would like to put better tools in their hands so that they're not making those kinds of decisions by force.
All right, thank you very much. The next question will go to Johnny. It seems like we're on a first-name basis here tonight. So for Johnny, of course, here in these days, post the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, a question that comes to mind, would you vote in favor of bolstering LGBT civil rights protections statewide?
You know, that's probably one of the toughest questions that the legislature is going to face in the upcoming session. Is certainly one of the most emotional ones. I have a really good friend. The example we all tend to fall on is the example of the baker, you know, refusing to bake a wedding cake. And I have a very dear friend who is a baker, lives in the district, and you know, she's one of the most conservative Christian people that I've ever met. But when she's been approached by a gay couple to do a cake for a same-sex union, she said yes, because she believed it was the right thing to do. And I think that we have to approach all of this with some common sense. It's not right to discriminate, and we need to provide those protections in housing and employment, but our state constitution also provides protections for religious freedoms and religious liberties as well.
All right, Mr. Hatfield, Ryan?
I want to be very clear about this. I believe in equal treatment for all people, period. Now, legislatively, I support adding 4 words and a comma to the state's anti-discrimination law, which are gender identity, sexual orientation. That is the best and most efficient way to make sure that we are protecting the rights of all Hoosiers. And only in the last phrase of my opponents do I agree with. The state constitution protects folks on who feel that this issue may infringe on their rights. We already protect folks who feel that their businesses may be at risk, but we're not doing everything to protect our friends with the LGBT community. And I have a very simple position on this. It is that I believe in equal treatment, and we must add those 4 words and a comma to the state's law.
All right. The next question will come from the Courier and Press's Shannon Hall.
Okay, we're going to start with Ryan. Should Indiana have a more universal pre-kindergarten system, and how would you like to propose it to be funded?
Thank you for asking. This is the issue I enjoy talking most about, the issue I've heard the most about from folks as I've gone door to door, as I've gone into schools. And I'm proud to be the son of a teacher and also have the endorsement of the Indiana State Teachers Association. Absolutely, we need pre-K, and we need pre-K for every kid. We need pre-K for every kid in the state because currently we're providing it to about 2,500 kids. We've turned down federal money. So your question is, should we have it? Absolutely. Who should we have it for? We should have it for every kid, no matter their economic status. And how do we fund it? Well, I'll tell you how. One, we accept the federal money that's there. Every state around us has. They have larger pre-K programs than we have. So we accept the federal money, and then we also make sure that we reallocate resources because our pre-K program ensures when a kid goes to pre-K,
Time is running out.
if I could, when a kid goes to pre-K, they're more likely to graduate high school, more likely to graduate college, more likely to own a home, and less likely to go to jail. This needs to be a priority in the next legislature.
All right, and Johnny, we'll give you a few extra seconds if you
All
like.
right. Okay. My daughter's a teacher, and education certainly should be a top priority for the state of Indiana. You know, Ryan's absolutely right that we need to reallocate some resources in order to be able to do that. You know, federal funds, we need to look at that option. The big thing about federal money is a lot of times it comes with strings attached, and I want to make sure that when we do accept federal funding for anything, whether it's pre-K or for highways, that we're also looking at what are the strings that are attached. Is it something that we can actually live with within the state of Indiana? And we certainly need to be looking at the pre-K options and expanding on that program statewide.
Although I don't disagree with anything he said, may I have rebuttal time on this?
Well, sure, then Johnny will have
That'd be
that
fine.
amount of time as well, 30 seconds rebuttal.
Because this is an important issue. This issue matters because currently we're only providing pre-K to a couple hundred kids in 5 counties. And that's in part because we refuse the federal money. But it also is in part because we haven't prioritized it enough. So you asked earlier about public-private partnerships. This is one area where it would be a really good thing to have public-private partnerships to ensure that every kid can go to pre-K. We need to leverage the federal dollars. We need to revert state allocations. And I want to give a very specific way we can do this. We're currently spending $300 million every decade on ISTEP. Let's return ISTEP to the local schools and spend that $300 million to send every kid to pre-K.
All right, and I think we will get to ISTEP here shortly as well. But Johnny, an opportunity for you to respond to that?
You know, I'll wait until we get to talking about ISEP.
Okay, all right. The next question comes from Jay. Is it Zach or Jay? Jay. Okay, I think it's Jay Young from the Courier and Press with the next
Well, I've been
question.
strong-armed now to ask you about ISTEP. Mr. Kincaid, what should replace ISTEP?
Here's the problem that we're dealing with right now with ISTEP, is that because it's a politicized situation, what we actually have is this tangled up mess that started to develop of people with different agendas on different sides. And the bottom line is we're moving so fast that it's hard to tell what we're going to wind up with. It's possible that we could wind up with something either just as bad or worse than ISTEP. You know, when I was in school, I remember taking a form of standardized testing, I guess it was, but the test was designed to measure what we knew as students. And ISTEP put so much pressure on students and on the teachers because it's more about evaluating the teachers. In one school that I heard about, there was a 3rd grader who actually took his ISTEP booklet and threw it on the floor and threw a major tantrum there in the middle of the classroom because he was so stressed out over this test. Right. And we need to find a better way to address it with less time spent testing our students.
All right, and speaking of time, we'll try to stay within these limits here. Ryan, your answer, please.
I'll do my best. I mentioned the $300 million spent on ISTEP. That doesn't include, or I should say, that doesn't even mention the $800 million spent on the testing and then the remediation that follows ISTEP. Sometimes it's just because a student's having a bad day. Sometimes we've had testing problems. So we need to return testing to the schools and the local municipalities. And we also need to replace ISTEP, but we need to do it in a way that has teacher involvement. So here are, you asked what should we do about it. I saw today the legislature is going to probably punt it off another year. But as I go to the legislature, there are a few things that I'm going to be requiring of a new test. It be shorter in length, that it have teacher input, that we are able to assess a student's periodic academic improvement so that we can tell when a student, if they're getting better, and then we also must have instantaneous results for teachers and for parents so that they can address what needs to be addressed when we get them.
Okay, on to the next question now, and that will come from Zach Evans of the Courier and Press.
I'd like to stay on education, and this is a question I asked at the candidate forum the other night, but I'd like to ask it again. I think it's very important. Indiana schools, including some at Evansville, are facing a teacher shortage. How can you, if elected, help address this problem? Ryan, this goes to you first.
So we currently have the 14th highest number of students while facing this teacher crisis. We invest less per student than most states, and we are one of only 8 states with textbook fees and who penalize teachers who stay in our most vulnerable schools. So a way to make sure that we encourage folks to go into teaching is, one, to ask teachers. The state legislature has too often failed to ask teachers how to attract teachers. But then we also need to treat them as professionals. I think I told you the other night that the problem we have in this state too often is that we don't treat each other with respect, and teachers have oftentimes been at the wrong end of that. So we need to treat them as professionals, which means to pay them as professionals, to return testing to the local schools, and then to decouple teacher pay from test scores so that we can make sure our teachers are treated as the professionals that they are, and aren't forced to move into higher funded schools.
All right, and Johnny?
I think the issue is one of respect. Having a daughter who's a teacher and also friends who are teachers, I think we need to have that level of respect for the people who are teaching our children. A really good friend of mine, Dave Westridge, 19 years as a teacher and decided to leave the profession. After 19 years. And the reason that he left was because he wasn't being respected, because he wasn't able to really teach in the classroom anymore. We were so busy with trying to prepare students for a test that the teacher couldn't do what the teacher does best, which is helping to shape those young minds. And so after 19 years of teaching 5th grade, Dave left it behind. And I value experience. And I think that we need to do more to show respect to those teachers with experience to keep them on board so that we're able to maintain a great quality of education here in the state. But we're only going to do that if we can stop disrespecting our teachers and do more to retain good qualified educators.
All right, thank you very much. And I believe the next question is back to me. We mentioned earlier the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and LGBT rights. Looking back on the time when Governor Pence was trying to sell RFRA, what did you think of that idea at the time, and how would you have handled it differently if you had been in that position? Johnny, we'll start with you.
Well, first of all, RFRA was absolutely unnecessary. It was a battle that didn't need to be fought. Primarily because in the Indiana State Constitution, in our Bill of Rights, in our state constitution, Section 3 specifically carves out those rights of people to exercise their religious beliefs or acts of conscience. And it specifically says that no law can be passed to alter that. So RFRA was really a battle that we didn't need to face as a state. I thought that overall it was handled very poorly from the standpoint of from the very beginning. I mean, once it was passed and all of that started kicking up, all of that dust, I just think we handled it very, very poorly, and all for something that was an unnecessary bill. And I'm a believer, don't pass a bill if it's not necessary.
And Ryan, what were your thoughts at the time on RFRA?
At the time, I was against it. I am against it today. I've made my position on LGBT rights very clear. But this goes to another issue, which is how are we treating each other in this state? You know, our kids are the third most bullied in the country. Our students who go to school every day, they're the third most bullied kids in the country. Only 2 other states, their children report being bullied more than here in Indiana. We've got more people leaving Indiana than coming to Indiana. We cannot address any of these other issues until we treat each other with respect. That means our LGBT friends, that means our African American friends, that means our women, our workers. We need to treat each other with respect before we are able to address any of these other issues.
And just a quick touch for the folks listening on the radio or watching the stream. This is the District 77 debate hosted by the Evansville Courier and Press. I'm your moderator, John Gibson. And next question will be coming from Evansville Courier and Press reporter Shannon Hall.
Hi guys. I'm going to ask a question which is one of my favorite subjects, voting. Would you like to loosen, maintain, or restrict Indiana's voter ID laws? Ryan?
I think that we need to make sure that every Hoosier gets to vote. Voter ID laws around the country have oftentimes been found unconstitutional because of how they restrict folks' right to vote. In fact, a law that isn't too different from ours in North Carolina found that those that put it in place were systematically trying to prevent African Americans from voting. And so I will always address this issue with a concern for the right to vote, ensuring that every Hoosier has the opportunity to do so and to cast their ballot and let their voice be heard.
It amazes me every time that I look at the voter statistics for the state of Indiana and for Vandenberg County especially. To see the low turnout rates is just very, very difficult to see because I can remember the first election that I voted in, and it was in 1976, a presidential primary. I voted for Ronald Reagan in that presidential primary. Now, he didn't win the nomination that year. It went to Gerald Ford instead, but I remember very clearly that pride, that sense of excitement about going to the polls, and I really have a hard time when I see the low number on turnout. I'm not sure that the voter ID laws restrict that. I understand that the purpose of those laws is dealing with trying to prevent fraud at the polls. I really don't know that those laws actually have that negative effect.
Johnny, my first election was sometime after 1976.
All right, we'll move on. The next question will come from Zach Evans of the Courier and Press.
Starts off with Johnny.
Yes.
Nearly half the country has either decriminalized, legalized, or passed medical marijuana legislation. If you elected, would you support legislation to either decriminalize, legalize, or allow medical marijuana in the state of Indiana?
I grew up in the era when marijuana use was actually at its peak. In 1975, that when you go back and you look historically at drug use statistics, in 1975, pot use was like, it skyrocketed. It was at a peak at that time. And I remember some of the people that I hung out with in high school that didn't graduate because they just lost their sense of motivation. That getting high on a daily basis became a bigger priority for them than anything else. The harmful effects of marijuana, I have trouble with saying that smoking something is a good idea for curing an illness because of the health problems that come along with that. So I struggle with the idea of doing anything right now to decriminalize or make marijuana illegal.
All right. Right.
As a prosecutor who has prosecuted drug crimes for some time, including dealing in marijuana, I can support the use of medical marijuana once we advance our ability to have an on-road test for the usage of marijuana. The problem around the country, whether the state has adopted these laws or not, is testing folks who have consumed marijuana, especially on the road. We need to do everything we can do to keep our drivers safe. And one of the issues that we don't have, quite frankly, with alcohol, because we have an on-road test, is we don't currently have a widespread test that can test drivers' ability to drive. I believe that medical marijuana can be helpful. I think the research proves that, and I'll be open to that when we're able to use the technology available for on-road testing.
Can I add on to with Ryan, because I'm in agreement totally with that. But the reason that there's no test for marijuana is because marijuana is fat soluble instead of water soluble like other drugs. Other drugs will flush out of your system very, very quickly. In the case of marijuana, it can stay in your system for up to 6 weeks. So when you do a blood test on somebody for marijuana, well, they could have smoked it 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago and still show up in the test. So there's no way to nail that down and specifically be able to say this person is high on pot at the time that they've been stopped.
Mr. Hatfield, is that
Please,
in your experience?
We're getting closer. He's right, and that's my struggle right now. He's right about the technology we have available to the EPD and to our police officers today. But I can promise you there are folks my age, there are millennials all over the country trying to make this happen because of the importance of making sure that we can use every medical possibility to treat folks with illness.
All right, well, let's move on to the next question now. That will come from Jay Young.
Mr. Hatfield, which candidate for president do you believe is best for Indiana?
I am voting for Hillary Clinton because I believe she is more qualified.
Would you care to elaborate on that?
No. I certainly can. The question was, which one do you believe is more qualified for Indiana? And that's my choice.
All right, and the Republican candidate, Johnny Kincaid.
I'm going to give a very short answer as well. During the primaries, actually, all of my top picks for president wound up, gradually kind of being peeled away from the pack, and it is. I believe that if Mike Pence were at the top of the ticket, I wouldn't even have to bat an eye about who I would select to vote for president, because I think that Mike Pence would be the right man for the job. In the case of Donald Trump, I will vote for Donald Trump because there are so many long-term implications with this election, but I do it with a bit of a bad taste in my mouth.
All right, let's move on now. We have time for a couple more questions, and then we'll be getting to final closing statements here in a bit. A reminder, you're listening to the District 77 debate on WNIN FM, also live stream of the Courier and Press. Our candidates are Johnny Kincaid and Ryan Hatfield. And let's go back to education a bit here. We know that just a few blocks from here, there will soon be an IU med school put together and opening in another year or so. One of the schools that was not allowed to take part in that project, however, was Ivy Tech. What would you fight to provide funding for Ivy Tech to move it into the med school eventually? And I believe it's time to start with Mr. Hatfield. Who took the
Sure.
first question last?
I don't know, but I'd be happy to go first. I will absolutely fight for funding. I believe that it was political, that the funding didn't come through. It had to do with some leaders at the top, the Republican leadership in the House, in the State House, all but said so. And so I will absolutely fight for funding. I'm proud to be an adjunct professor at Ivy Tech and think that they create a wonderful product. And if I may elaborate, Ivy Tech is an institution of gold for our community, a community where most of our folks are low income and can't afford to go to private institutions or institutions that cost $30,000 or $40,000 a year. Ivy Tech allows a student to go and to advance their career, whether it be through a degree or through a trades program, and that's part of what they're trying to do at the med school, and we absolutely need to include them, and I'll make sure that we're doing everything we can to fully fund it.
Right, and of course, as Mr. Hatfield pointed out, he is a part-time teacher at Ivy Tech. Johnny, your response to this, would you support moving Ivy Tech into the IU Med School?
I would absolutely support doing that. I will work with our fellow state representatives from Southern Indiana, Ron Bacon and Wendy McNamara and Holly Sullivan and Tom Washburn. I'm around newspaper people, what can I say? But to work with that group of folks, as well as our state senators, Vanita Becker and Jim Toms, to make sure that we do what's right for this community. And the right thing for this community certainly is to provide the funding to move Ivy Tech into the med school.
All right, and let's move on to another question now. Zach Evans.
Your predecessor, Gail Reekin, at the last Meet Your Legislators event, said for her successor to keep up the fight for women, children, and policy. If elected, how Evansville is represented change under your representation?
How Evansville will...
How would you represent Evansville at the State House? How would that change compared to Gail Reekin's tenure?
Well, for one, I'm probably just a little bit more conservative than Gail is. But, you know, I'm a believer in representing. See, that word representative in the title of the job is really what's key there. Being state representative means actually talking to people and representing them at the State House. And that's exactly what I would be doing. You know, I would represent the people who are struggling to get by from paycheck to paycheck. The people, the older people that have been displaced from work. I know a lady who was 59 years old and was terminated from her job just last week, and she's wondering what she's going to be able to do. I want to be a champion for those people, to help them, to serve them, and to represent them in Indianapolis.
All right, and Mr. Hatfield, same question.
I alluded to it in my opening statement, and the truth is both of us have met with organizations, business owners, people all over District 77 and throughout Vanderburgh County. And the truth is, what I hear more often than not is it just doesn't feel like they know the effects of the legislation. I had that experience as a prosecutor through the first criminal code rewrite, the second criminal code rewrite, the third criminal code rewrite, because they weren't asking prosecutors and defense attorneys and court staff, hey, how does this affect you? When I went and spoke to the home builders, they said, you know, they pass these things and they never call us. They never talk to us. When I went and spoke with teachers over at Harrison High School, when I've talked to teachers throughout the district, they tell me, you know, some of these things I even read and think, gosh, that sounds okay, but when I'm in my classroom, it just doesn't work. I'm going to be a representative that makes sure we are paying attention to how legislation affects people in Evansville.
All right. Well, let's go on to another question here. As I think it's become clear this evening, you two agree on many issues. As I understand it, you're both pro-Second Amendment, anti-abortion. Can you tell us what makes you stand apart from your opponent? And I believe it's time for Mr. Hatfield to go first.
Well, there are some principles that my opponent and I agree on. And I'm proud of that. I'm not somebody who is on a fringe. I'm somebody who intends to work with Republicans and Democrats and anyone who wants to get things done. But I think there are several differences, and that is, one, our ability to go in there and to provide a different viewpoint and not be the 72nd vote in a Republican supermajority. I think another one is our take on government and the belief that we need to ensure that we're providing local municipalities with the tools necessary to help people. I also think we take a different approach, as you've heard tonight, to some of the issues regarding crime. And I think that there are other issues, including the prevailing wage. I don't believe, I've never been privy to information that makes me believe that my opponent is going to ensure that local workers are first to receive a contract, first to have an opportunity to work here when a project comes up, and then to have the ability to make a wage that allows them to feed their families.
All right, we've got to move on. And Johnny, your answer, and you can have a few extra seconds there as well.
All right. Well, yeah, Ryan and I do agree on a lot. And honestly, I think the voters have a great choice to be able to make. I think the voters win no matter who wins this race. But there are differences in philosophy. I believe that we have done a great job in the state of Indiana with our finances over the past 12 years, starting with the Daniels administration, that the state has been good stewards of our tax dollars, getting our budget under control to make Indiana the envy of all of our neighboring states. You know, some of our neighbors are having to write IOUs in order to take care of their bills. And we were in that position at one time here in Indiana as well. But the past 12 years have turned that to the point where now we have a rainy day fund here in the state of Indiana. Having a savings account off to the side that we don't touch is actually a very big plus for our state. And I believe that we need to continue that good stewardship of the public money that we've been doing for the past 12 years.
Could I respond to that?
Sure, well, we've got a little time. Go right ahead.
Thank you. It's one thing to have a state government, state legislatures, a governor who's proud of how they've taken care of state funds. And in some respects, we've done a good job, and in some respects, we have failed. But I'll tell you who doesn't feel like we've done a good job, and those are the workers down in the second ward. The guys working on the hotel who haven't had a raise in 10 years. Although the state of Indiana may be the envy for governors around the country, our workers make less than every other worker in another state. Our workers, their wages lag behind other states. So we've got to do a better job to make sure that our workers get a raise that they've needed for the last 15 years.
All right, in 30 seconds if you like, Johnny.
All right. Here's the thing. I have lived at that level that those workers are living at. I understand what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. I understand that a lot of people in government live at that upper 10% of the community, and they have trouble relating to that worker, that person who has to struggle to come up with gas to put in their car to get them to work. I understand those people, and I am ready to work for them and represent them and make their condition better.
All right, we'll have to move on now to closing statements. Starting with the closing statements, 1 minute, and we'll start with Johnny Kincaid.
Right. There are some differences between my opponent and I, along with the similarities. But here's the real promise that I can make to you right now, and that is that I will understand where you're at. I have lived my entire life in the working class. I've lived in the same home, in the same neighborhood, a working class neighborhood, where home values are less than $100,000. I've lived in that home for more than 20 years. I understand what it's like to work your entire life and become unemployed and wonder what your next step is, because you feel like you're too old to continue to be usable. And I'll work for you to help improve that condition, to help improve the wages for people in the community, but also to make sure that we are providing the services that are needed to help folks who are struggling be able to improve their condition and work their way up.
Okay, and Mr. Hatfield.
I'd again like to thank WNIN and the Courier and Press and my opponent. We lasted through an entire debate, which we don't see very often on CNN, without saying anything negative about each other, I think. And that's the type of representative I'm going to be. I'm going to be an uplifting and positive figure in the community that tries to get things done and does it with a smile. But I also want you to know that as a deputy prosecutor, I have fought for victims and their families in some of their most trying times. And I too understand what's going on in our community. I know that our wages haven't gone up. And I'm proud to say that while I'm going to be a positive figure, I'm also going to be a fighter. I'm going to be a fighter to improve your wages, to improve your schools, and to keep your neighborhood safe. This is the prosecutor I've been. It's the way I've lived my life, and I look forward to representing you in the State House.
All right, and we'd like to thank the District 77 candidates, Ryan Hatfield, whom you just heard from, and to Johnny Kincaid. Thank you both for joining us this evening. Thanks to the Evansville Courier and Press and the crack staff of reporters here. I'm John Gibson of WNIN FM. Have a good evening.
That was ready. We survived.
Yeah.